Boards. Thank you for joining us today. The National Association of Workforce Boards is delighted to present this webinar with our colleagues at SJI and the workforce boards that are joining us today. You'll hear a little more from them. We're really excited that we're able to do this during Workforce Development Month, which is this month. And the National Association of Workforce Boards represents more than 590 workforce development boards and their partners across the country, supporting economic development and innovation to meet the needs of job seekers, businesses, and communities. We are a partner along with SJI in a national partnership grant awarded by USDA and FNS, providing technical assistance to workforce boards interested in becoming SNAP E&T third-party providers or intermediaries. During today's webinar, our colleagues from SJI will facilitate a discussion with 3 SNAP employment and training partnership models with local workforce boards and programs. You'll learn about how they work in partnership with their state SNAP agency to integrate and deliver services to job seekers on SNAP E&T. Please note that we are going to record. We did start recording today's webinar just to document today's presentations and share it with those who aren't able to attend. We will take questions following the presentation. Feel free to drop questions in the chat and the Q&A, and we will take questions at the end with our presenters after the presentation. And with that, I will turn it over to our colleague and partner, Nick Codd at SJI for today's session.
Thanks, Mala. Go ahead, Danny, and you can move on to next. So this slide here really just sort of highlights what Mala just talked about, that we have been working in partnership with NAWB and along with third sector for actually about 4 years now on an FNS funded project, National Partnership Grant project, working to connect workforce system with SNAP E&T. Next slide. So today's agenda, Mala touched on this a little bit, but I'll just give you a little more information. I'm going to start with a very brief overview of the SNAP E&T program, just SNAP E&T program basics, just so we have kind of a basic context as we move forward. And then the 3 workforce partnerships you're going to hear from are from Arapahoe Douglas Works in Colorado. You'll hear from Andrea Barnum. You'll hear from Workforce Southwest Washington, Washington State. You'll hear from, that's Mondo Antonio. And then batting third will be Patrick Gearing from WorkSystems in Portland, Oregon. So three very, very well-established, somewhat different, slightly different workforce partnerships to hear about today. So I've asked them to do like about a 7 to 8 minute overview of their program, kind of highlighting their SNAP E&T activities. Then I'll follow it up with some facilitated questions and then questions from all of you. So that's kind of what we have scheduled and in mind for today. So next slide. So I'm going to go through some of this stuff kind of quickly, just because we're trying to squeeze a lot into our time slot here. But so just a reminder for those who might be new to this whole concept of SNAP employment and training. So this is a program that's administered by the United States Department of Agriculture, Food and Nutrition Services. So the SNAP E&T program is a program that's designed and designated for people on SNAP. All states deliver SNAP employment. All states provide SNAP to their eligible recipients, and all states are required to operate a SNAP E&T program. These programs can look very different from state to state. There's a lot of flexibility in how they're designed and structured. One of the things to keep in mind is that SNAP E&T is a program that's offered in many ways to help SNAP recipients that have a work requirement meet that work requirement. So there's a work requirement aspect to SNAP E&T that does play into kind of a lot of the policy and guidance. The other thing I want to point out is that state SNAP agencies not only do they need to offer an employment training services program, but they are expected and required to consult with the state and local workforce development board and system. So there's not a lot of specifics and expectations around that, but that is something that needs to happen. What you're going to hear about today, though, are three partnerships that go well beyond that expectation or that requirement. And that's one of the things that I think, many workforce boards and even SNAP agencies are looking for, how to go beyond that expectation. So next slide. So some real basics. So when we talk about SNAP and SNAP employment and training, who's eligible? Like, who are the SNAP recipients? So essentially, SNAP employment and training is for individuals that are on SNAP but not on TANF. And these are individuals that are able to work upon program completion. So some individuals that are on SNAP might be children, some individuals on SNAP might be seniors, the elderly. They're obviously not going to be SNAP E&T, potential participants. So this is really for people that are on SNAP. And when you get down into sort of the nitty gritty, what you're looking for is a person on SNAP in the particular month that they're participating in an E&T service. And we'll talk a bit more about what that actually means at a later point. Next slide. So with the SNAP Employment and Training Program, FNS looks at the services from a perspective of components. And what I mean by that is employment and training services are referred to as components in the SNAP E&T program. Here's a list. I'm not going to go through all of them, but here's a list of what SNAP E&T has identified as their E&T components. A lot of this is very, very similar to what's being offered through most of the Department of Labor type programs, just maybe a little bit different terminology and description. A couple of things I'll point out is that there's also an expectation with each of these components, each of these services, that case management services are provided. So there's a case management element to all of this work. The one thing I will point out is the last component here, job retention. That's a service that kicks in once somebody becomes employed, and it goes for a period of 90 days. That is the one SNAP E&T service or component, and one opportunity to actually be reimbursed for your work if you're a contracted provider when somebody is no longer on SNAP. So that's something to keep in mind. Otherwise, these services are people, back to that definition of who's on SNAP, you have to be on SNAP during the month that you're receiving those services. Next slide. Another key aspect to the SNAP Employment and Training Program are what FNS refers to as participant reimbursements or supportive services. These are different types of support, oftentimes smaller, less expensive types of assistance that's provided that are designed to remove barriers to participation in programs or participation in employment, or to make somebody more employable. So these are a requirement and expectation to be made available. And again, that sort of rounds out the E&T program. You have the components, you have case management, and you have participant reimbursements. Next slide. So a quick look at E&T funding, because this is always a big question. So as a workforce board, what type of funding is out there, that you can utilize and access? So there's two funding streams. FNS makes available what are called 100% funds. These are formula funds that go to each state. States get, what I would describe as being modest amounts of funding. These dollars are typically used to administer a SNAP E&T program. They don't go out into the field to providers. Although in some cases, these 100% funds are provided to intermediaries to operate as intermediaries to work to help the SNAP agency fulfill their SNAP E&T obligation and deliver their services. In some cases, they're used as seed money to kind of get programs started, get services started. So there are some opportunities there, but by and large, it's a smaller pot of money that isn't always available to workforce boards and or entities in the community hoping to work in the SNAP E&T arena. Where there's an opportunity with the SNAP E&T funding is what we refer to as the 50% reimbursement funds or 50-50 program. This is the program that provides a reimbursement when a provider is utilizing non-federal funds to deliver services, to pay for the staffing, to pay for all the activities associated with an E&T program. To access these funds as a provider, as a board, for example, or as a community-based organization or a college, you need to be contracted with the SNAP agency. You have to have a contract. You have to be approved to do this. You have to be a contract, that type of thing. And again, you utilize non-federal dollars to deliver your services upfront to SNAP E&T participants, and that makes you eligible for a 50% reimbursement. Those reimbursement dollars come back as non-federal dollars, and they can be reinvested in your program and draw down additional reimbursement. So they're really sort of unencumbered funds once they come back to you. So there's a good opportunity there if you have that opportunity. So that's the funding. You'll hear more about that from our three partners, but I just want to touch base on those elements of the SNAP E&T program. Of course, there's a whole lot more that we could talk about, but just wanted to give you some good background to sort of give a little bit of a base to work from as we move forward. Next slide, Danny. Okay, so now I want to turn things over to our three presenters, and we're going to start in the state of Colorado. I want to introduce Andrea Barnum from Arapahoe Douglas Works, and she's going to talk to us about her program. And the one thing I will say, she may say this as well, is that Colorado is a county administered state. So SNAP E&T is really operated from the county perspective locally more so than the state. But Andrea, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nick. Happy Workforce Development Month, everyone. I'm Andrea Barnum, Workforce Programs Manager over SNAP E&T programming at Arapahoe Douglas Works. We are located in the South Denver metro area of Colorado. I started in the program over 10 years ago now as a case aide, actually, with SNAP E&T. So I've seen all the changes that the last decade has brought, lots of changes. I'm going to dive right into high-level overview of our programming, starting with the administrative side of things. So at Arapahoe Douglas Works, our SNAP E&T programming, also known as Employment First, is county administered, just like Nick said. So we are considered contractors for Arapahoe and Douglas County Departments of Human Services. These are two different counties. Arapahoe County is considered a large county in Colorado with about 650,000 residents. Douglas County is more of a medium-sized county, about 375,000 residents. We have a memorandum of understanding, or an MOU, with Arapahoe, and an intergovernmental agreement, or IGA, with Douglas County. We do update these contracts annually, and we have regular provider meetings to discuss programming, especially when there are big changes going on, end of the public health emergency, that kind of stuff. So our Employment First, or SNAP E&T team, is comprised of 6 workforce specialists, or case managers, 1 lead workforce specialist, and a program supervisor. Although we're under the umbrella, as you see, of Arapahoe Douglas Works, our workforce specialists on the EF team spend, I'd say, 90+% of their time with SNAP E&T participants exclusively. They do provide coverage in our resource centers and are very knowledgeable about other workforce programs, but they are considered specialists in the world of case management. As far as referrals and services, year to date, we have received nearly 90% of our referrals from human services directly. We also receive referrals from community partners and other workforce programs. We also receive a lot of referrals from, word of mouth from, former or current participants that kind of spread the word. We love to hear that. We do serve both ABODs and non-ABODs. I think we're at about 55% of our current caseload are ABODs and 45% non-ABODs. Our program is really customer-centered and includes that, career pathway navigation, labor market, data intelligence, lots of career exploration, workforce development workshops and assessments, education and occupational training assistance, work-based learning opportunities, cliff effect counseling, GED tutoring, intensive case management, and supportive services, like Nick was talking about as well. The program, we really focus on family well-being holistically through that 2-gen lens, looking at the holistic needs of the family and not just the participant receiving services. Although we can't cover that 2-gen services out of SNAP E&T funding, I want to be clear on that piece of it. We make a lot of referrals to community partners and use other discretionary grants and funding to support those 2-gen needs, but we do assess that with our SNAP E&T participants and households. So as we're talking about funding, we utilize those 100% funds that Nick was talking about. They are a much smaller portion of our overall allocation. I think we're running about generally 5 to 10% of our allocation is 100% funding. We also receive 50-50 participant, 50-50 admin funds. In Colorado, we have 80-20 participant funds, which is essentially 50-50 funds that the state partially matches, so we have less of a matching requirement at the county level. Our county partners at Human Services provide the matching funds to cover our programming. We do earn enhanced funding in our program, which the counties, both of them, receive directly, and then use that to reinvest back into our program. So like I said, SNAP E&T team is one of the many teams under the umbrella of Arapahoe Douglas Works alongside, TANF and WIOA, Business Services, Career Services, Veteran Services. I am the manager over our talent enhancement programs listed here. So in addition to being kind of co-located at different workforce locations with our resource centers, we also have office hours at different community partner locations that are located in both counties that we provide SNAP E&T in. That would include a food bank and a community center, mental health clinic, transitional housing site. We really want to provide services in many community locations to meet customers where they're at, but where they're being served already in the community, and to minimize those barriers for them engaging with us. And to along those same lines, to ensure efficiency, we do co-enroll with WIOA, youth programming, SLRF, and many other discretionary grants to leverage funding to provide more comprehensive services. And actually, our SNAP E&T supervisor at Arapahoe Douglas Works presented at NAWB on our co-enrollment process earlier this year. So let's talk more about partnerships. Obviously, we work very closely with Human Services in both counties. We do provide regular updates to their eligibility texts and work alongside them to update, policies when we need to, and make sure that they're well informed about our services so they can make great referrals to us. We are co-located at each department and provide in-person and virtual services out of those locations. We also work very closely with the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment and the Colorado Department of Human Services. We meet regularly with our state partners at CDHS. We just had an open house last week for Workforce Development Month, and they came and toured one of our newer locations. I even traveled with their staff earlier this year to the SNAP E&T State Institute in Virginia. So if you don't have a solid relationship with your state partners, I highly recommend reaching out, setting up regular meetings, whatever regular will need to mean for you and what's going on. But I don't know how many times we've brought up a wish list or discussed programming gaps and said, who do we need to bring to the table to explore, X, Y, or Z and what we want to do. And they've been a great resource in sharing, county work, regional work, and help to connect to maybe organizations that are doing similar work or want to kind of tackle similar obstacles. And they've always been very helpful in that. We're always wanting to expand services and bring more opportunity to our participants. And it's really helpful to have the support of state partners. So I can share a few ways that we've partnered and how that's led to innovative programming. New this year, actually, we've been working with CDHS and a local community college, Arapahoe Community College, to help them onboard as new third-party partners. We want to build the framework for how in Colorado SNAP E&T providers and third-party partners work more collaboratively and less in silos to better meet the needs of participants in Colorado. We'll be using the same benefits management system, providing services in some instances to the same customers, and want to build that partnership that works for our customers. And that's to our strength. So an example of this would be that we can't actually the third-party partner, they can't provide supportive services to participants, but we can. So let's make sure that participants receive everything they need to be successful, while also making sure that that there are no duplication of benefits and that we're assessing for that. Last year, we worked with CDLE and CDHS to pilot a new program called PACE, or Paving Access to Careers and Employment. This program was designed to use state workforce funds to increase the number of SNAP E&T participants engaging in workforce across the state. We now have PACE navigators across the state referring SNAP applicants and recipients to whichever workforce programs will best meet their needs. So in our agency, this program has allowed us to expand services this year to eligible SNAP E&T participants that don't live in Arapahoe Douglas counties, because we're only contracted with Human Services to provide services to our residents through our SNAP E&T program. We've also worked with Mathematica to roll out the Goal For It methodology across our agency. So if you're familiar with Goal For It, it's amazing. When we first did this years ago, we had the full support of CDHS and CDLE, and we just heard last month that CDLE is now rolling out Goal For It statewide in Colorado for all workforce development programming. So it's nice for our workforce specialists that they're all already very familiar and utilize this across the board. So on the last slide, I have a photo of one of our participants that came into our program from DOC. He was struggling to maintain sobriety, and after working with our Implement First team, our SNAP E&T team, was able to receive his CDL, reestablish parenting with his kiddos, and he's doing phenomenal now. And I wanted to share that Workforce Development Month, because he's the why we do the work that we do, why it matters, why working with our participants is so important. So with that said, SNAP E&T programming, very close to my heart. I'm thankful to be here today and encourage you to reach out if you have any questions about SNAP E&T at Arapahoe Douglas Works. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. Lots of good information. And we will circle back and have an opportunity to ask Andrea a few more questions about what we shared. So next I want to move on to actually my home state, state of Washington, and we'll hear from Workforce Southwest Washington. So Mondo, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nick. Hello, everyone. My name is Mondo. I'm a program manager here at Workforce Southwest Washington. We cover 3 counties in Washington state, Cowlitz, Clark, and Wahkiakum, with Clark County being the biggest county right next to Portland, Oregon. Next slide, please. With our BFIT program in the state of Washington, since 2019, the state has been leading a statewide workforce initiative program called Economic Security for All. And we were part of this pilot since 2019. And since then, the program has continued to grow. And just recently, out of the last legislative meetings and the legislative session, Economic Security for All was able to be signed into a House bill for those stay in the program, as well as its future and the strength of which the program is able to offer now being signed into law. For us, since Economic Security for All is a state-run program funded by state funds, we early on have been matching our program to the basic food and employment training, which is what SNAP E&T is called here in Washington state. The focus of Economic Security for All is really to get individuals who are not at the self-sufficiency wage engaged in the program and support with case management and funds for training, as well as support services. For us, we match these funds, and what that means is we match a percentage of the money that we're given, as well as some of the performance that's required for this program with the SNAP E&T in a 50-50 grant with the Department of Social and Human Services here in Washington state. They oversee the BFIT program for all state, and they have quite a lot of really built BFIT team on their side where they can support the contractors. And they've been doing this for a while, so there's lots of resources that we as subcontractors benefit from this DSHS state's BFIT team. As a local workforce board here in Washington state, we do not do any of the service delivery ourselves. So we have subcontracts that do the direct service delivery of the program with participants within the American Job Centers of our region. The adding BFET or SNAP E&T into the all EXA contracts does complicate the program a little bit, but it ultimately is worth it to support participants fully and getting them cohesive supports and access to funds for training and things along that nature. WSW primarily supports all subcontractors with technical assistance, grant management, integration, and strategy. The BFIT program and SNAP E&T, same thing, require a lot of attention and focus to make sure it goes correctly. Some of the particular aspects that require some of this attention and focus include that cost per participant with BFET or SNAP E&T program is a little bit lower than our economic security for all program. So coordinating to ensure that we meet our planned performance for BFET and all the components is very critical for us in our region. As well as with economic security for all, the focus is really to support the participant with where they're at, with a little bit less planned performance around the different activities and even support services that are needed. And with the SNAP E&T program, when planning out that program, you have to be pretty specific on how you best to plan to support participants throughout the program. So making sure that you're tracking those components and if needed, making the modifications or focusing efforts to ensure that the planned performance is met. With the SNAP E&T program, that is a big priority of us. And what the Workforce Board does to support our contractors is just to ensure that everything is running smooth. One of the pieces is to get a 95% case note accuracy. So we work pretty closely with our service providers to ensure that they have all the assistance that they need to code, interact, and do all the correct processes and procedures with SNAP E&T. Luckily, as I mentioned, we have a really strong state SNAP E&T team that is able to provide us supports and frequently convenes all of our SNAP E&T providers in the state of Washington from quarterly or monthly meetings to provide different tips and best practices. The state of Washington also has established it's called a BFIT handbook, but it basically overviews all of the needed information for how to best run the SNAP E&T program. And we are in that thing quite frequently, back and forth with those service providers anytime any questions come up around the SNAP E&T process. For us, outreach is done through a few ways. The SNAP E&T program is housed out of all WorkSource centers or American Job Centers in the region. We have 2 adult centers and 1 center focused on opportunity youth here in Southwest Washington. We tend to not advertise specifically for the SNAP E&T program or any of the other programs that we have within the center, as a matter of fact, but rather just encourage participants to come to the center and be screened for eligibility of the programs we have, because there's a high possibility we do have a program that is able to support the participant, even if they're not necessarily eligible for SNAP E&T or economic security for all. And in terms of other outreach and partnerships, we really rely on partnerships specifically with DSHS as well, Department of Human and Social Services here in Washington State, to support our BFET program. One of the things that our region has established is an MOU with the department to create information sharing opportunities specifically around individuals who have recently received SNAP benefits within our region, so that all caseworkers can then do some outreach and see if they're interested in getting engaged with our workforce development programs. Additionally, there is through the DSHS regions, there is a program called Employment Pipeline Navigator, and this individual just supports participants within the DSHS space getting connected to employment, and we are able to enhance those efforts significantly, especially with our support service funds and training funds that we get from EXA, as well as our SNAP E&T program. Lastly, and just more recently, the SNAP E&T program in Washington State has rolled out a new participant-determined referral platform in which participants can determine if they want to be referred to SNAP E&T providers in the region to support with workforce programs. And that has still been going new, but we are definitely seeing new enrollments come in through that way, or at least referrals for us to engage and connect with. Overall, there is a large co-enrollment with all economic security for all participants, as that is the baseline. So participants must be first enrolled into the economic security for all program, and then they're co-enrolled into our SNAP E&T program. Most of the time, participants may not necessarily fully know or be aware that they're in two programs at the same time. Most likely, they're also enrolled in a few other programs based off their eligibility. And that's kind of just done on behind the scenes with the case managers to help the participant experience. Obviously, there are paperwork and acknowledgement forms that are shared and given, but all of that can be quite complicated to track on the participant's end. So just trying to make it as more focused on the participant and how to support them and their barriers with what they're eligible for. And we do see a large co-enrollment with the WIOA adult population. I think on a little one page of our program, it shows about a 47% co-enrollment with WIOA adult, as well as a 23% co-enrollment with WEST, which is a National Dislocated Worker grant that we have in the region. Common barriers or aspects specifically with enrollment include with SNAP E&T, it was showed that the eligibility factor is receiving SNAP food benefits. And one of the common uneligible factors, something that would make a participant not eligible for the SNAP E&T program, is also receiving TANF or cash assistance. And through the work that we've done, we do see a large number of participants receiving both services, TANF and cash. And so those participants won't necessarily be eligible for the SNAP E&T program, but they would still be eligible for the EXA program. And so just tracking that is definitely one thing that is a focus of ours in our local program. Lastly, matching with SNAP E&T program has definitely supported all abilities and to support participants, but also as an organization. This has been Economic Security for All has been a pilot since 2019, and we've been able to match some of our funding to the SNAP E&T program since then. And through that 50-50 grant, at the end of the year of this program year, we get about 50% of the funds that we utilized on the BFET program. And that comes back to us as unrestricted funding that really supports our abilities to create new initiatives, support participants in abilities that most funding regulations wouldn't necessarily let us, as well as just develop additional financial resources and lessen and support to lessen our reliance specifically on federal funding and federal resources. In the past, we have utilized funding from local community foundations and other organizations like similar to the foundation through different grants. There's also been private donors and funders of our organization who have supported our program, and we've been able to match some of those funds. And it really is around just trying to see what funds are available to match to the SNAP E&T program. We are very lucky in that we have a state-ran workforce initiative program that is easily matchable to the SNAP E&T program. And so we are always looking at other resources we can match in addition to our economic security for our program to enhance the supports for our participants. Particularly with the participant reimbursements of the SNAP E&T program, they are just very helpful and supportive. The caps for some of the programs here in Southwest Washington are very generous and provide a lot more flexibility than perhaps the federal funding of what is allowed for those support services. In particular, one highlight that I always like to mention is with SNAP E&T, glasses can easily be a participant reimbursement, especially as we need to see to do work and perform work. And for some of our other federal funding, glasses hasn't necessarily been a thing we've been able to support participants with. And with that, I'll thank you all so much for listening to our overview of our SNAP E&T program and how we've enhanced our economic security for all program with it.
Armando, great information. Very well done. Okay, so now we're just gonna jump over the Columbia River and move into the state of Portland or state of Oregon in Portland, Oregon. So Patrick, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Thanks, Nick. I'm Patrick Gearing, the Chief Program Officer at WorkSystems. We're the local workforce development board that serves the Portland metro area. And I didn't get the message. I didn't get the memo about having nice graphics and data. So it'll be bare bones in terms of look, but hopefully good
All
content.
good.
Yeah. So first I'm going to give you, can you go to the next slide? Overview of the program, how it works, then go to the services and components. Services is what we call it in DOL languages. Components is what it's called in Department of Agriculture language. And like Nick said, you can make those match. And then, in my experience, funding is one of the big barriers that folks face in terms of trying to launch a program. What is the funding source you're going to use to generate the match? So I'll cover some of how we did that in the Portland metro area. Next slide. So I think might have skipped one slide, Nick.
Who did I? Oops.
Oh, it's okay if not. Yeah,
okay.
my slide's different on here, but that's fine. So we have a consortium application umbrella that includes 11 partners, 2 community college, and the rest are nonprofit community-based organizations. They serve generally target populations, could be ethnic group like Latino Network, could be immigrants like IRCO, an immigrant serving organization, could be homeless. So a lot of nonprofits that are in the space of specific communities, housing residents, for instance, and then also community colleges. At this stage, our program puts in about 4.4 million annually, and it's 50-50 match, right? So we have 2.2 million that we generate in match funds on an annual basis. The funding sources are City of Portland, block grant funds from both counties, community justice funding, and then the 2.2 million that you see above, which we'll generate over the course of the year. We call those reinvestment funds, and we place those back into our SNAP 50 program to have compounding and growth there. Next slide. Okay, so we've very much simplified our services. This year, we're basically down to 2 kinds of services in the program. It's a large program, lots of partners, lots of moving parts. We used to try to match things like support services. You pay for someone's gas, you pay for work clothing, and so forth. We had so much difficulty making sure that we had the receipts and the backups. We were verifying that they were working in that month. So we decided to back off the smaller items of cost and really focus on the items of cost where most funding was being spent, and there was the least amount of administrative work and compliance work, making sure that we're submitting costs that are backed up. And so the areas we landed on is career coaching and individual training accounts or occupational training. So our career coaching model goes through those 11 partners that I mentioned that are population specific and culturally specific. They develop a career plan. They're with the participant from the very start at outreach to retention. And that's really a good model for us, especially in dealing with people in poverty because of some of the instability, because folks are relationship based. There's a whole lot of reasons why because of language and other culturally specific factors. The career coaching model is something that we have had as a focus, and most of our funding is paying for career coaches. And then, a lot of people are working who come to the program and receiving food stamps. Research shows that over half of people who receive food stamps are working in that same month. So the goal of self-sufficiency or prosperity, that isn't entirely attended to through a simple focus on work. So we really try to push occupational training. It's not something that everyone can do, but to the extent that we can do it, we're increasing the earning power and the employment outlook for people that go through training programs. So that's an area where we have folks on construction, healthcare. We're starting with preschool, and I'll explain a little bit of that over my next slides. But these are jobs where training could last from a handful of weeks to a couple months, but really make an impact on a person's earning and their employment outlook. So those are really the two areas of investment where our funding goes to be matched. The language difference is called career and technical, it's called job search assistance when we do the career coaching. In our grant, it's called career and technical ed when we do an occupational training scholarship. Sometimes it would fall into the component category of a pre-apprenticeship training program in our grant. But essentially, it's just two components that we're providing through the program. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's a breakdown of the funding. Yeah, job search training and career technical ed. Of our total grant, which I mentioned is 4.4 million, 3.4 million goes toward career coaching. Could be for Somali immigrants, could be for people who are on parole that are coming out of county jails, could be for people in the homeless continuum of care. All of these different coaches with a population focus doing start to finish coaching. So that's a large majority of the costs for that component, career coaching or job search training. And then with a real strong emphasis on trying to get them through occupational training in a career that's of interest to them. All of that goes through our one-stop system. The occupational training scholarships are done so that we have the infrastructure. We like the connections between community-based partners at our American Job Center. So that and other services that you get when you're being career coached are provided through our one-stops, which are called WorkSource. So between 3.4 million and 1 million, you have our total program at 4.4 million, as I mentioned. I should also mention that the Oregon Employment Department, our state employment agency, they have a program too, and we commonly match funding for occupational training scholarships. So if the total scholarship is 10,000, you might have our program putting in 5,000 and the employment department putting in 5,000. So that we're leveraging each other in terms of making a greater impact on that. Occupational training is one of the areas where you can have two parties in a program providing a single service together for an individual. There's a prohibition of duplication on many fronts, like job search training, but it makes a lot of sense in very big ticket costs, like sending someone through a occupational training program. We work together with our state agency there. So some of the services there are not visible that are in the SNAP program because they're on the Oregon Employment Department side. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm not going to read through all this, but I want to get you the sense of the funding sources. It's been really important over the years for us to diversify resources. Funding is declining, in the federal formula funding, and we have the funding streams coming on and off, like right now, ARPA era funding declining within our environment. So having diversification is really important to us. And a lot of it comes from state, local, and city resources. So these are just some of the examples that if you look through these take on the characteristic of us trying to solve, us meaning the Workforce Board, trying to solve a problem for a local governmental partner. So there's significant homeless crisis in our metro area. Some folks can secure housing stably through employment as they go through services. So we're that part of the continuum services in that context. We have workforce activities within jails. Without intervention, often that is just leaving people on the streets with no ID, no idea how to get a job, no place to live. It's contributing to a pipeline into homelessness. So we begin in the jail, getting people ready for work and continue post-release. And the Department of Community Justice provides us non-federal funding to do that. So just a couple examples of how we're a solution to local governmental partners and folks, in this environment, helping get them food stamps and onto the SNAP program as they're released is one of the services in the program. Okay, next slide. I'm going to dig down on just a couple more. Let's see the time. Yeah, so we have a program that is voter ballot measure that's, I think it was 2002, so it's 2 years in, called Preschool for All. It's a Multnomah County ballot initiative. It was about 65% voter approval to universalize preschool for all children and make it free in Multnomah County because of the benefits to ongoing education and career outcomes when children have access to preschool. So this is something that wisely unfolds over time. And the target date for having universalized preschool is 2030. So we have 6-year progress of doing that. Another aspect of the legislation was that it sets wage level requirements for any preschool provider receiving Preschool for All funds from the county. So you can't receive these funds and pay less than what the county says is a living wage for a teacher's aide, a preschool assistant, a floater, all the positions. That also increases gradually over time until 2030, when it will be pinned to kindergarten teacher and kindergarten job salaries, and just so as not to create a shock to the employer system of preschools. But when we saw this, we realized there's going to be very large employment demand because of the universalizing of preschool. It's going to take a lot more workers, and that these are going to be actually living wage jobs that are a good match for the people we serve. So we have been working on this for a couple of years. The Preschool for All levy generates about 150 million a year. When you talk to Preschool for All leadership, they say the biggest barrier to reaching their goals is workforce shortages. Going in, I thought it maybe these facilities, because construction projects notoriously backlogged and stalled, but no, it's the workers. They lost 1/5 of all preschool workers in Oregon during the pandemic. The preschools were closed, and those folks never came back. And at the same time, they're trying to increase preschool services in the county by many fold. So there's going to be lots of employment growth, good jobs, and we are the solution for Multnomah County to help them reach this goal. We're starting off small and have a grant of $1.5 million. You'll see these, I had mentioned career coaching, that's a service, and occupational training. And we're also adding internships. This is not a matching program for us. And that's why it says a matching opportunity, because we're going to scope it. But it's a practice of ours not to start off a new grant and try to do a SNAP 50/50 program the very first year. It's just adding to the challenges of startup. And so we're looking at it, but haven't implemented a SNAP 50/50 program. But you can see enormous opportunity here. I'm interested in the internships or the work experience part of it. It's turning out to be a major strategy in terms of workforce development. These preschool centers that are part of, there's about 100 Preschool for All centers facing huge workforce shortages. You can see them have to close down rooms and turn away parents dropping off their children because they can't meet state mandated staff to child ratios. That's how bad the shortages are. So we have been recruiting workers from across our programs and systems and placing them in preschools and paying them for 300 hours and helping them with the certifications, background checks, and everything it needs to take to be a preschool worker. And that's turned out to be an enormously effective strategy. It's about 60% of the people who we place in preschools end up getting hired permanently by the preschool centers where we place them. As we move that one forward, we're going to look at how internships or paid work could be part of a SNAP 50/50 program. We've done it before, and there were some challenges. I don't recall the specifics of the challenges. Internships are more challenging than some of these other areas of service to match, but this is an example of the opportunity. Again, the overarching theme is it's a local government, there's a workforce need, and we are the workforce solution in the context of preschool for all. Nick, I saw you just jump on. Should I pause here? That other one is just
No,
a
we
different
need to
opportunity.
wrap up and move on to questions if you can.
Sure.
So yeah, just if you can wrap it up quickly, and just want to have time for some questions and follow up.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just
Your
say the
information is great.
benefits.
It's just time.
Oh, you don't need it. Yeah. So just to wrap it up, we have the benefits or additional resources to make a greater impact, serve more people. We have more partners and community support. We're able to create linkages between our one-stops and CEOs. And it just increases our positioning as we negotiate with local government to manage their workforce solutions.
All right. Thanks, Patrick. I didn't mean to cut you off. You have great stuff to share. And all three of the presentations were great.
No worries.
I think you guys have heard a ton of really good information. So now I do want to shift to an opportunity to ask some questions. So if you have questions, you can enter those into the chat, or you can come off mute. I just want to start with a couple things myself, not to dominate the question and answer period, but just wanted to ask a couple of quick things. First of all, I want to acknowledge that each of these programs we've heard from today are well established, very sophisticated programs, high functioning programs, also in states that are very committed to SNAP employment and training. And that makes a big difference. Not all states operate that way. And if you're in a state that's not quite where, these three states are, you're going to have to maybe you might have a little more of a struggle to get to where these three programs are, but it can be done. And FNS is making a lot of efforts to build out the SNAP E&T program and to work with states to expand. But one of the things I was hoping to hear, each of you work with community partners, community-based organizations, community colleges. Some of these organizations might be smaller organizations that work with specific populations. I think you mentioned that, Patrick. But maybe one or two of you can just talk a little bit about what makes a good community partner and maybe some of the things to keep in mind as you're maybe thinking about engaging community partners or working with them.
I can start us off. I think
Sure.
a good community partner is someone that is already serving our SNAP folks in the community, like where they're already being served. It's helpful for us to meet them where they're at. Like I said earlier, someone that is open to us kind of blending, and being either on site, if we're able to accommodate that, or work into their existing programming or into ours. So I think someone that's willing to come to the table and discuss, what our goals are, who we serve, and how do we work together to better serve these participants in their households, and someone that continues to meet us at that table. I think when they're ready, they'll work with us, but it might be making sure you have the right person at the table too. I think our most successful partnerships are one that are ready for us to kind of be either on site or to participate in events with them. We do participate in a lot of community events, and I think that's where we our outreach is most successful, when we're meeting with participants in person, or we're able to help them meet that specific need right then and there.
Great, good. Patrick or Armando, you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, I would add to what Andrew said. We really take the idea behind one stops seriously, which is, there's one stop, but many partners working together to wrap their hands around the client. So those kinds of agencies that are prone to partnering, there's some that they want to serve A to Z their clients, and maybe not so much outreach to others. That's more challenging to work with a partner that's sees itself as the only service provider and the right service provider for the client, and doesn't do it more through partnerships, because we're one stop and everything is about partnerships. So that I would add that to the list of characteristics.
And just hopping on really quickly, for us, we have very much a gate that participants need to be work ready. And so we find a lot of synergy with organizations that support participants getting work ready. We kind of are bound a lot by getting participants enrolled into our programs first before we can support them. So organizations that can help participants get job ready, such as getting a birth certificate ID, real directly, have been great partners for us as they can support in the first half and then we can support in the second half and come together to finish it off strong.
Great, thank you. Okay, just checking with the audience. Does anybody want to come off mute and ask a question? Got just a few minutes left, but I want to make sure there's that opportunity. If not, just one last sort of quick question. Do we have a question? Okay, so there's a question from New Mexico. New Mexico has a growing homeless population. Just curious if one of the programs you partner with has had a positive impact in that area. So, I know, Patrick, you mentioned that, or Andrea, whoever wants to take that one.
Patrick, go ahead. I went first last time. I'm happy to talk on it.
Okay, I'll go. We'll share the 60 seconds left. Yeah, we have funding from Joint Office of Homeless Services. It's really people, we divide them into chronically homeless and situationally homeless, and you can move from chronically to situationally. It's really the latter category where we're mostly focused because it needs certain stability to be in an employment program. Well, we do, and we get folks into careers where it's okay to have a record, it's okay to get the background. Recycling and garbage truck driving is a good example. Recently, it's been a good match. But yeah, we do. It's a public issue, and we're on the workforce solution to address that public issue.
Thank you.
We do leverage funding to help our participants with rental assistance if it's, they've just found employment and are needing, that deposit or whatnot. But we also have a really successful program. It's called Goals. And it's a partnership with some community-based organizations and human services where we actually, they purchased land and built off of what was used to be like kind of dorms. And now it's family living, where we have right now, I think we have 19 families on site, and it is kind of like a one-stop where we have all of the wraparound services on site, including Arapahoe Douglas Works for Workforce. And we're able to provide those services on site to our participants that are housed there. And again, that's, Human Services was able to purchase the land, support from Colorado Department of Human Services. And it's run by an organization called Family Tree. And we've been a partner from the very beginning. It's been very successful to see our participants be there for up to about 9 months. Some are much shorter than that. Some have been there a little bit longer, but we have workforce on site, and it's been a very successful partnership for us. And I'm happy to talk more about that in the future because we're a little over time. Sorry.
Yes, great. Thank you. Good. Well, thank you all very, very much. This was great information. I feel like we could keep going for another hour or two. Molly, I'll turn things over to you just to say our final words.
Sure. Well, thank you all for your presentations and the great information and your insights for your SNAP E&T programs. It just was phenomenal to hear about all the great things that you are doing. We will send the presentation slides and any other resources to you following the webinar. And if you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information is on this deck. There's also contact information for the presenters on a previous slide, and that'll all be in the deck that we send you afterwards. Thanks again for joining us for Workforce Development Month, and we look forward to connecting with you in the future. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.